Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Ed Weiser, Reef Weiser in the Reef to Reef Forum, and we're starting a new podcast show called SPS Insider with Steve Tyree. And for a lot of people might not know who Steve is, and I've known him for a long time, and he's a very interesting person and has started a good business over the years selling SPS, and he knows a lot about corals. And so, Steve, would you want to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of synopsis of what you've done over the years?
Well, thanks, Ed, for the intro. Yeah, this is my first podcast, and it's nice to be talking to the Reef to Reef audience. But yeah, my history in the SPS world goes back about 23 years, but we won't talk about age here. But basically, it all started back about 92 when I happened to just probably buy the very first Acropora colony at a local reef store. It was in Los Angeles, Pasadena Tropical Fish. The guy's probably still there. His name is Steve. He made a bet with an Indonesian relative of his who was an exporter, and the bet was, can you ship this coral alive? And and of course, one side said no way, and the other side said, yeah, you can. So they tried it, and it worked. And I happened to walk into the store a few days later and saw the live Acropora down at the bottom of the tank. Now, nobody probably knew what it was, but I'd seen lots of pictures of them, and I pointed it out. I said, is that an Acropora? And he goes, yeah. Is it alive? And he goes, yeah. And I go, is it for sale? And he goes, yeah. So that was probably the first Acropora colony bought from a reef store in the United States, possibly the world. Who knows? But it's crazy to think back from that very first time they tried to export it and ship it out of Indonesia to how many acro colonies have been shipped out over the years. It just from that one first started. But that was in 92, and that colony ended up growing and doing really well. I made probably 50 fragments of it over the years and distributed them out to people. And I ended up really getting into the SPS. I was one of the first guys into it. Back then, everybody thought I was kind of crazy. It was the fringe people. I remember talking to a guy in Macna, and he was saying I was crazy for keeping these stick corals. They didn't move. They had no color. What was I doing? I should keep these colorful soft corals. But it snowballed and I ended up being, for a while, the #1 transshipper of the SPS corals in the whole country. And I was shipping to stores. I used to ship to Sandy's Pet Shop there in Louisville, acro straight from my facility. But that all culminated in doing a MACNA presentation in '95 at Louisville. But that was how I started into SPS, and then from there it just kind of snowballed. But there's been a lot of ups and downs over the years. But some of the other things I did, that was about 92 to 97. Then about 98 to 02, I ended up discovering a natural filtration system that I've been doing research on and experimenting with. It's using live sponges and sea squirts as a primary natural filter. And I've written four books now, 3 of them about that topic, and one about stony corals. And that I did all that from 98 to 02, and I was still doing a little bit with the SPS, selling them. And then I really got into the SPS around 03 to 05 when I started Reef Farmers. That's 2 F's plural, reeffarmers.com. And we started the whole limited edition thing. And it just to check it out, I just recently went through my files and I counted. I have over 380 limited edition and auction edition corals on that site. That's 380 pages that I edited over the years. It's tough thinking that I have to go back in there at some point and re-edit them and update them. That's a lot of pages. But yeah, so we've made over 300 limited edition corals, and it all started in 03, 05. That's when it really took off. And then in 2006, I started a Coral Farmers Market company with a partner, and we've been doing coral shows, small to medium-sized coral shows. Was what I like to call them is coral shows. And we've done about, I think yours is going to be number 40, I think, the one we do in Louisville later in the year. Actually, November 21st, we'll be in Louisville, and I've been doing that primarily. And all during that time, I ended up speaking at 4 MACNAs. I spoke at the West Marine Conference in Vancouver. I've spoken in England. I've done numerous U.S. clubs. I'm kind of now retired from speaking. I only come out occasionally and help new starter events out and things like that. And over the years, I've done some consulting with Ling 60, Reef Raft USA, the old Route 66, which went out of business this year, and numerous retail shops. But yeah, I basically was into SPS stony coral when it wasn't cool, and now it's a pretty big thing now. It's really nice to see where it's come. And also too, back then I was one of the first guys back in the mid 90s pushing the bluer lights to get out more color from the SPS corals. But it's really nice now to walk into some of these coral shows like even MACNA and all that, and see all these blue lidded tanks and these incredibly colorful corals. Because back in the early days, we were arguing back and forth about whether Acropora even had color, because people were still trying to use the old 5500K bulbs, and it was a really heated time back then in the old fishnet days, CompuServe fishnet.
Right. Those were the good old days. And we could have big arguments about color and corals and such.
That's basically my history. Years, I was one of the first guys into the SPS. I've spoken about them numerous clubs, and I've written a book about them, and also done some natural filtration research.
I said to walk away for a second. The dogs were barking. My dogs were barking.
I think we got through that without too many screw-ups on my part. So
right, yeah, that's good. Steve, the one thing that you see a lot of people, I always see that say I've got a Steve Tyree coral, and that's one thing you always Tyree coral. How did the whole naming of your corals come about from that point? You think a lot of people, I think, even are selling fake Tyree corals, aren't they?
Believe it or not, I did not push that at all. Okay, because I looked into it when people started using it a lot. It was other people that used it, not me. I've never marketed them as Tyree corals. I mean, I've actually stood there and sold corals to people who got upset and came back to me and said, "Why didn't you tell me you were Tyree?" It's like, I never actually pushed the name. So I looked into it earlier when it first took off in 2003, 2004, when the name took off. And it's really hard to trademark a surname. So I just said, I'm not going to do it. I'll just let everybody else do it. But it really flabbergasted me, because take Atlantis Corals, who's kind of a little bit out of the business right now, but they were really big in the the mid 2000s. I mean, I would make a new limited coral for them, a limited edition. I would call it the Atlantis whatever, and I would market it that way. And then he would put it on his site, and then I go back to his site 3 months later, and all of a sudden it's the Tyree whatever. It's like, no. So I couldn't stop it. It's just something people did. And I think what they did is because the name wasn't really connected with a company per se. So the name could just be used, and it was like, you're not giving it away. Like, you're not sending somebody to a competitor then. You're not like saying it's a commerce coral. It's a Tyree coral. But it was used really a lot in the early to mid 2000s, and then more and more people started naming corals, and more people got into it, and now it's kind of just not there. It's not really used a lot. It's more of a minor player in the current market, but there's still a lot of the old school corals out there. Some of them are really cool to keep even in modern times, and some of them are like, you'll see a Tyree rainbow, and it's like, well, there's only 3 colors in it, but back then, having 3 colors was like incredible, So things have changed. The better lighting and all that, we can really bring out these rainbow colors in a lot of these corals.
What do you think about corals and color? Is there a certain? Is it more just the spectrum of the light hitting the different fluorescent areas of the coral, or what is your main thought on that part of the business, you think? Well,
it's an ongoing science. Science is still researching it, and it's a very complex situation. There's no single rule that you can apply to every single pigment and every single coral. There's a lot of different pigments. Okay, there are, to define them in a broad basic categories, there are bright light corals and there are weak light corals. Now, weak light corals would be like my original blue chalice. If you put it in bright light, it was brown, but if you put it down low, it would blue up. That was a weak light coral. And like the deep water acros. The deep water acros are weak light corals. So for them, the intensity is not as important as the spectrum. They really need that blue turquoise light because that's what penetrates down deep. And to them also too, feeding and nutrition and proper amino acids are more important than, let's say, a shallow water acro. Now, or a mid-level coral, like a mid-level coral to a shallow water coral, those are going to be more light dependent, and those are going to probably have pigments that develop under strong light. But basically, the lighting and the growth game is really complex issues. But in general, the conventional wisdom of the hobby has been wrong on that more often than it's been right. I mean, everybody's been saying, you know, oh, you can grow corals faster under 6,500K. That's just not true. The 20Ks were the best at 20K halides were the best at growth and the best at color that we had. Now, that's not true for all pigments. Okay, there are some pigments actually that will only fluoresce, let's say orange, if you hit them with green light. So it's a much more complicated game than all that. So, and I'm actually trying to research that now, because with LEDs, you can really get some narrow spectrums out there, and you can really target specific pigments in corals. So I'm trying now to categorize all the different pigments that are out there and try to like get a group of acro pigments. So that I could make like or consult with somebody and make like an acro specific LED light.
Right. I know I've got these radions, as you can see behind me over here, and I've searched the internet, and there's a Facebook group from England that has a really good different schedules for corals, and we found a particular schedule that works really great for acros called a NAV. The name is NAV-1 or whatever, and
NAV.
Yeah, NAV. Yeah, and I could send you the link to it. But we found it really made a big difference in corals. We placed them in different in the same aquarium with two different lighting schedules going, and the particular variation in coral, the lighting strengths made a great difference in the growth level of corals. This tank here is kind of new behind me. I'm kind of waiting for you to get up here in November to help fill this guy up. So, but we have, me and a friend have been playing with different lighting schedules on radions, and have found one that really makes a big difference. And I'm sure that you will find that same case. It's a mixture of light spectrums that makes the difference. You know, same way with the metal halide to 20Ks. There's a spectrum in there that corals just like. You know.
Well, I actually did a audio video presentation on lighting, and I actually, one of the little secrets I pointed out was if you used a 20K halide with a 6500K halide, it was like the perfect mixed light, because the 6500K, or even a 10K, because the 6500K and the 10K had violet, you had the blue from the 20K, and then you'd have a little bit of green from the 6500K. So you're exactly right. It's a little bit. It's not just the blue. You got to have a little bit more. So that's the kind of research I think that people are going to be doing with these LEDs, because they give people a lot more control.
Right, and it's also in a situation where we're trying to use our human eyes, and sometimes we have to look at the corals and see what they're doing, because really our human eyes are very terrible at color and what we see, as you well know. And what other things would you like to bring up today? Anything particular?
Let's see. I am starting to work on a new book, the CMAT Volume 2. I'm working on Chapter 1 right now. I've got the intro pretty much done. The whole outline of the book is done. It's actually 10 years delayed. It was supposed to be out 10 years ago, but basically I have a book series called CMAT, which is Captive Maintenance Advanced Techniques. And volume 2 was supposed to formally define this natural filtration system that I've devised into like a zonal-based system. And it was going to formally define it because before then it's been kind of experimental, and the first volume was experimental. But I've now done it, used the system for, probably 15 years, and I know it works. So I've done all this research. It's just been taking me forever to get this down into a book. But what I found out is with these ebooks, with these PDF books, that you can get the book out real easy, because my books are basically short run books. They sell hundreds, not thousands. So they're really costly to have printed. You try to get like 100 printed for like $1,000. They're going to cost you $10 a pop. And so you got to come up with that money up front. And the short run books, the binding was always terrible. I had, because you couldn't get good binding. So anyways, the electronic book format solves a lot of issues. So I'm going back into doing more books and doing more audio video presentations. So that's what I'm kind of working on now. And that new book will probably be coming out by the end of the year.
In your discussion on that particular topic, what is your take on the whole refugium movement kind of thing? It's sort of like a simpler version of what you're doing with your systems, right?
Well, refugiums have been around since I started my systems. In fact, back then, we couldn't use the word refugium because somebody was trying to trademark it, or there was word out that you'd be sued if you used the word refugium, or refuge, or whatever, refugia. I don't know which one it was, but so I stayed away from using that topic. They're using that word, but yeah, it's been around for a long time. But the funny thing was, I was just speaking to an aquarist in Italy, who said that there's a movement actually to do just the opposite of a natural-based filtration system. They're actually boiling their live rock. There's people out there in Europe with these crazy ideas to boil the live rock and to get rid of all the other animals and just use the rock and the bacteria. I guess it's an autotroph versus heterotroph situation. But what people don't really realize is that these stony corals, because of all the algae they have in them, you're talking millions and millions of cells of algae, billions actually of cells of algae. They are basically autotrophic. The SPS are basically autotrophic. All day long when the lights are on, they're producing coral slime, which is excess organics from the algae, sugar-based, carbon-based organics. The algae is taking CO2, photosynthesis in the light, and it's producing carbon-based sugars, which end up being excreted through coral slime. So all day, so that's why we needed skimmers when we had like trickle filters and basic base rock, simple rocks, because the SPS especially, they don't really need to be fed that much. About once a week is enough for SPS, unless it's a deep water or something. Then you might want to feed a little more. But when you get to the LPS, like the Favias, the acans, the chalices, and stuff like that, they lean more to the heterotrophic side, where they may not be net organic producers. They may be kind of in between, and especially if you feed them. But basically, the autotrophs produce organics, like plants, trees. They grow and they produce organic material, and the heterotrophs, they consume it. Like us, we're heterotrophs. We consume. We don't produce organic matter. At least nothing we want to talk about. But so yeah, there's a big debate going on, and there's a group that's actually going, I think, the wrong way, boiling their live rock. I mean, no. Live rock, when they originally harvested, it's full of life. It's got sponges, sea squirts, bryozoans, just an incredible amount of diversity of life. And then we end up curing it, which is basically we kill off all that stuff because it kind of died during the shipping process when they took it out of water. So we end up killing that stuff, and then we end up with this basically dead bald rock, kind of with some coralline on it. And to us, that's live rock. No, that's half dead rock. That's been half killed. Okay, and what my system was all about was getting that life back into the rock, letting it propagate, putting the rock in an area where that life can propagate into a low light refugium or a low light cryptic zone. I call them zones. Other people call them refugiums, but But the whole zonal concept kind of explains it a little better, because you have like low current zones, low light zones, and various things like that, and filter feeder zones, you know. Um, but that's kind of all. That's the view. That's the incredible thing about this hobby. There's so many different ways to do things, and there's so many different viewpoints, and things go in crazy directions all the time.
Right.
And
There's
I
there's always some new topic or some new way of doing something, and everything can work too. So everything can work sometimes. Right.
yeah, as long as you got that live rock. Now these guys boiling the rock. Okay, I don't think that's ever going to work. That's like, well, that's going back to trickle filters. They just got a really good trickle filter.
Right. That's all it is. You know, I remember rock back in the days when we started, where if you took a rock out of the tank, it would drain for a long time because it was so porous. There was so much stuff inside the rock, you know. And now a lot of people are scared of whatever's on the rocks or in the rocks or all that kind of stuff. That's where all the good stuff is usually, inside the rocks themselves, right?
That's where most of the diversity is. And actually, scientists have found that there is more, believe it or not, there's more inhabitable surface inside the rocks, inside caves, than a diver can see, than you can see by looking at a reef. You're just looking at a minority of the life when you cruise over a reef. It's all the pores and the caves and the cavities and the crevices that you can't get into. That's where the majority of the life is.
Right. And then, you know, and so we need to think about that when we're setting up our aquarium, so that we get all that growth. So I know for me, when I was up at the up in Magna just a week or so ago, when the Algen company that's coming to our frag swap November 21st, they had their new pods, and so I had some, and that's one of the things I bought. I said, "Oh, you got the new pods out." I went and ordered those. I've been throwing crazy stuff in there, you know, trying to get my like a web of animals growing in my tank, and not just basic bacteria. You know, that's an important step, as you well know.
Well, actually, I did document probably one of the first cases of living plankton in a captive reef. I called it cryptic plankton, but I did that at the Boston MACNA 2004. It's one of my audio video presentations. I'm going to formally describe that in the Volume 2 book that I'm putting together right now. But yeah, it was a small. The fact the plankton was so small you could hardly see with the naked eye. You had to have some kind of a magnifier, but it would just swim back and forth, you know. And it was, I think it's what they call a reef plankton. And the reef, it's not a pelagic plankton like floating in the ocean. It's a reef plankton which can actually rest for periods, you know, and it only starts swimming around when it's trying to catch whatever, bacteria or whatever, or particulate matters. But yeah, no, if you set up the proper zone, I think just about every system out there, if they use good rock to start with, and they use rock, let's say from established reefs that may have the plankton, they could get the plankton growing. Or you could buy pods from Algen. Yeah, they told me they were going to release a new product there, and I guess that was it.
Yeah, they released a new product. I bought a couple of bottles and containers and put them in this tank back here to get things started, you know. And it's an interesting way to. I think it always is best when you have a new tank is to slowly build up your system up to the point where you can keep corals successfully. You know, I see a lot of people go out and they'll just throw corals in a tank straight out, maybe 2-3 weeks after it's set up. And I always like to take it slow and build it up to where I can support things successfully, you know, and not just willy-nilly, you know. As you well know, we've had people do that before. Is there anything else you'd like to, what about any new events you got coming up in the future? Would you want to talk about?
Well, I guess this will probably air next week,
right?
During the week. So that the following weekend, we're going to be in Alabama. We have 2 events. One of them is not one of my events, but I decided to hook up with them. I'm going to speak there. It's basically going to be, there's no set topic. I could talk about any topic. You just basically ask the question, and I'll put up a little mini presentation and answer your question. It's kind of an open round table. I'm there to help you answer your questions. Like I said, I've been doing it for 23 years now, so I think I learned maybe a thing or two. But we're going to be in Huntsville, Alabama on September 26th, Saturday. And then we're following up. We're going to be the next day in Birmingham, Alabama on September 27th. You can go to the coralfarmersmarket.com site. That's farmers plural, coralfarmersmarket.com site to find out where those events are. And then in November, we're following that up with our first Coral Farmers Market Coral Show in Louisville. And I'm hooking up with an old friend by the name of Ed. You may know him. And that's going to be November 21st at St. Thomas Fellowship Hall. Right. And we have a pretty good group of vendors lined up. Algogen will be there. We have Spike's Coral's going to be there. Zoanthus.com, iJam, Reef Farmers. We've got, I've got an old poster here with not all of them on there. But again, you can go to coralfarmersmarket.com site and see that. I just converted, like I was talking about earlier, I just converted all my print books, which have been out of print for years, because I actually was making them by hand because the binding was so bad that I was getting from short-term makers. I was making them by hand, and it just took too much work. So I kind of like backed off the books, and they've been out of print for about probably 4 or 5 years. In fact, they're selling them used on Amazon. That's about the only way you can get them until now. I've converted them to PDFs. And originally, I didn't think books on computers or tablets would really be nice. But oh my God, is it nice? It is. It's incredible. It's incredible. I can have all 4 of my books up on a computer screen. I can scroll up and down, jump anywhere I want. As I'm writing a new book, they're there. There's all my reference material right there. I can download scientific articles and you look at them on the tablet, on the phone. It's just technology can be really good, really useful. But I've converted all my books to PDF that you can download on. You can read them on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer. And also I've got a couple audio visual presentations that are MP4s that can be played on your phone or your tablet. But if you go to Reef Farmers, that's 2 F's plural, Reef Farmers, just type this in your browser, reeffarmers.contentshelf, CONTENT shelf, SHELF.com, reeffarmers.contentshelf.com. And you can just buy them and download them right there on the spot to your favorite device. Right. But that's about all we have. That's about all we have for an introduction to me, I guess, and to get you guys up to speed on what I know, what I can do. If we do future events or future podcasts, we can get into some specific topics if you like, Ed.
Right. That's what the plan is, Steve. We get we can narrow it down now that we know who. Now everybody can know who Steve Tyree is. We can have just a topic on, say, keeping shallow water corals or SPS or even some soft corals. I know you know a lot about soft corals too. So even more, as much as our local shop in town, Blue Star Aquatics, has started getting a product from you, and it had some really nice soft corals I think he got from you the other day. So we're always looking for nice corals to have, that's for sure. But I'm glad everybody enjoyed this first talk with Steve Tyree, and we'll have more in the future. And just want to let you know who Steve Tyree is, and so that you can enjoy his vast knowledge in coral keeping. And talk to you next time, folks. Bye-bye.
That's a wrap.